The power of Christ compels you. The power of Christ compels you. The power of Christ compels you. He brought you low by his blood-stained cross. Do not despise my command because you know me to be a sinner.
Hey, yo, we're back. Surprise. It's a very special Christmas gift for you for the 1-year anniversary of In Madness Pod, which is today, for the 50th anniversary of this movie, The Exorcist, which is today. This is Shawn the Butcher and Vertebrae 33 for In Madness Pod, episode 22, part 2. The Exorcist. What's going on, dude? How you doing?
I'm all right. I just picked myself up off the floor. I had a sanguisugabog incident. You know, we're going through the part 1 of this movie, and that I had to, pick myself up again and dust myself off so we can get through the rest of this movie. I just want to say that I love this movie. I think this movie doesn't love me, but I love it, and it's okay if it doesn't reciprocate. But it's just it's a lot. It's not light fare in any way. I don't think it's something you could casually maybe people do just casually watch it when it's on. I actually don't even see it on things a lot because I think it still bothers people. And I think anyone who says it doesn't completely bother them hasn't sat down in the dark by themselves and just watched this movie. Put their phone down and watched it.
Surprise to you, you don't have to wait another week for a new episode of In Madness Pod. We're doing the same thing we did with Halloween. It gave us an idea. We did the back-to-back, so we're doing this back-to-back. We figured it was the most wonderful time of the year. It also fit our theme of everything that was going on. The worlds came together, so we're dropping it now. It's here for you. You don't have to wait. Welcome to, as Vertebrae put it, the In Madness holiday party. There's an open bar in the corner if you want to go help yourself. We got some snacks in the back, and entertainment will be here any minute now. We have
Burke harassing people.
Well, not anymore. Not anymore. You can make sure you follow us on the socials at In Madness Pod on all of the socials. Make sure you hit us in the mail sack. We will read your email on air. If you have any questions or comments about any of our episodes, this one or previous ones, inmadnesspod@gmail.com. Subscribe to the YouTube. Make sure you like everything. Make sure you comment. We want to hear from you. Spread the madness worldwide. Make sure you tell your friends. A couple of weeks ago, Vertebrae told me that we have listeners all throughout the world, which is just batshit crazy. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you tell your friends about the show. We do it because it's fun, but we want you to get in on the fun with us. So make sure you hit us on the socials and in the email and wherever you absorb these podcasts. Again, everybody listens differently. So however you are enjoying this, thank you for enjoying it with us and watching these psychotic movies I'm like wrapping presents, and I got these like gifts from my like cousins, my little cousins, and I'm just sitting there wrapping, and like instead of like the fireplace crackling and instead of Bing Crosby or Frank Sinatra singing in the background, I got Reagan possessed screaming for the priest to fuck her, and I'm like, what's going on? This definitely twisted my holiday in a way that none of my other holidays have ever been twisted before.
Yeah, and for me, I'm a man of ritual, so now like I'm probably gonna have to end up watching this movie on a yearly basis around this time of year because it just feels like it should be this time of year. But before we go into the movie, I just it's our year anniversary. So I'm just
happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Digital high five.
And we're doing it. And I wanted to say a thank you to you, Shawn, because I kind of came at you with this idea after we had done something on Instagram, and then we went with it. And you've put up with my inability to get things correct at times, and my endless notes and piles of gnarly bits, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate anyone who's out there listening to us, the people who tell me that they're listening, friends of mine who will text me about it, and other people reach out on social media. I think it's amazing. I think we can grow this audience even more. We certainly have plans to grow it in different ways, and it's exciting to just see people join into the conversation, send us emails, join into the social conversation. If you don't want to send an email, send us a message, rate us, review us. We might start reading some of the podcast reviews on here on point 5. So if you leave in an Apple, I know Shawn said everyone listens everywhere, but stats tell us that like 60% of the people or more listen on Apple. So you can write an actual review on there. You can put whatever you want in it. You can give us up to 5 stars. And just like the mail, we can read your review here on the podcast. We have a few sitting there from kind of way back when already that were written. And I think we can look at it periodically and we'll read it. We'll eventually read it here. But I certainly would love people to email us or reach out on social media and just tell us your first experience with The Exorcist, because I think that would be an interesting sort of social experiment to see how people came about it. And did you know about all these insane scenes first, which I probably is going to be the answer for most people, and how did you see it and where, and do you still watch it on a regular basis? And do we know what happened to the astronaut? Was he okay as well?
Which astronaut?
The astronaut at the dinner party. Was he okay? She said he was going to die up there.
Wait,
he's an astronaut.
Who's an astronaut?
The guy she says you're going to die up there too at the dinner party is an astronaut.
He was an astronaut?
Yeah, so she's saying you're going to die up there, meaning in space.
Oh, is that what she was alluding to?
Yeah.
Oh.
So he's an astronaut. So we want to know if the astronaut's okay. Let us know.
I thought she meant in her room.
No, she meant in space.
I thought
because
she
that's
meant
the
if you
astronaut.
go to my room, you're gonna die up there.
Oh, well, I mean, there's the whole Burke thing, but she's not talking to Burke. But no, he's an astronaut.
Oh, see, connecting the dots. Thank you.
Yeah, there you go. There's a golden gnarly bit.
You just hit me with a revelation fact. That's cool. That is phenomenal. Vertebrae, I want to thank you for putting up with me for this past year. It's been fun to watch our friendship blossom from being metal companions to Comic-Con companions to podcast companions, and growing this little community that we've had here from the comfort of our own homes with the insanity of both of our lives. And being able to miraculously put these out. We were doing bi-weekly what have you, and we were like, no, consistency is the key, and we have been doing fresh weekly episodes. So I also want to thank everybody who has listened, who has contributed, who has hit the heart emoji, who has hit the retweet, who has responded to anything that we have said from any of these movies, or just bringing up their own cool bits from it. The community and this family that we're building, I feel like, is very cool. And we just want to keep it growing and growing so we could do cooler shit and then bring you cooler stuff, and it could just be more fun for everybody. So thank you for listening, and thank you, Vertebrae, for putting up with my insane ass, because that's no cup of tea either.
Appreciate it. Well, you hold us together. Otherwise, it would just be me.
Man,
it's the podcast to be reciting facts. Like it's.
Are you ready to go? Do you have your facts ready?
I'm ready. I'm so deep into this movie and so absorbed from listening to the audiobook over the last few days and watching the movie multiple times that I am super excited to finish this podcast and take a break from the world of The Exorcist. I think I need it. And get ready, to celebrate into New Year's with maybe something a little more laid back.
Yeah, perhaps our first movie of the new year is like something like, because we went off the rails, I guess, with Die Hard and made ourselves not a horror podcast, but a whatever podcast. But then we quickly hit them with Exorcist right behind it, just to reassure that we haven't lost our step. But yeah, maybe our next movie is something more way lighthearted to kind of ebbs and flows is what it's all about. So are you ready? You ready?
I'm ready. Let's
The,
go.
the power of Christ compels you. I want you to lay back, let your eyes roll in your head. We
I'm doing
last
it.
left you with our mother Chris in absolute shock as her daughter Reagan spider walked down the stairs backwards, spitting blood from her mouth. The screen cuts to black and we see a psychiatrist speaking to Reagan. She's under hypnosis. She's got this 1,000-mile stare looking into nowhere. He asks how old she is. She says 12. He asks if there's someone inside her. Sometimes. He asks who. She doesn't know. Is it Captain Howdy? She doesn't know. He wants to talk to Captain Howdy. She won't let him. She's afraid to let him. He thinks if he can speak to him, then Captain Howdy will leave her. He has to speak to the person inside Reagan. A picture of a dresser gets knocked over. Oh, a picture on a dresser gets knocked over.
Mhm.
Reagan begins growling. She grabs the doctor by the crotch, I guess, and
Yes.
jumps on top of him. Everyone pulls her off, and she screams bloody murder.
And you see her face start to morph a little at certain points in the film. Obviously, it changes as it goes along, and it gets battered, cut, and bruised, and everything. But there's weird little flashes of like kind of different faces throughout, and we get it for the first time here with the psychiatrist. I have to say that this group of people, between the doctors and the psychiatrist, uh, they're the most confident bunch of people that they can handle this situation. Like every single one of them is just like, we got this. And the person who ultimately handles it is the most insecure person with the most problems of anyone in the film, and steps up. But the rest of them are just, come on, what's the big deal? We got this. And we do need that because we're seeing some insanity. And 1973, when are we seeing this before on film, at least for American audiences, in a mass release like this, in a major film like this? These things, we said it during another podcast, iconic. This one is emulated by everyone, and they all fall short when they try to get there. And we've had sequels to this movie that have fallen short.
Oh, they're so bad. I tried watching and they're so bad. I'm
We've had
sorry.
a current
I don't mean to hate on any movies, but yeah, I did not enjoy the and the new Exorcist that came out. I have not seen the new
I have
Exorcist.
not seen it. I know there's some cameos, I think, which might be interesting to see. It might be interesting to take a film like this one time and have us watch the sequels and then just do one episode where we talk about like all four sequels, like kind of summarize them, or three sequels
Mhm.
or whatever it is at once, because I believe uh the sequel to this was also a book called Legion, and that was not part two because the Friedkin was out and Blatty was out for part two, but they brought Blatty back for part three, and they used his novel Legion, which is supposed to be a really good book, as part three. So apparently part three, it's like Halloween, it gets confusing, but apparently part three is better. And then the new film that's out, Believer, is sort of supposed to jump right from part one, like they did with Halloween, and ignore the other films. Write in and tell us and explain this timeline to us. But
I'll be honest, the only reason I watched the third Exorcist movie is because the Callous Dow Boys, shout outs to the Callous Dow Boys, they have their shirt is the Exorcist 3 shirt, but it just says the Callous Dow Boys instead. And I thought it was pretty gnarly. And I'm like, why Exorcist 3? And it happened to be on Hulu. And I watched it. And I'm like, boy, is this a snoozer. I
right,
was
and
not.
that's where you can say, I don't mean to cut you off, but the novel for this is an incredible book, but it's in Friedkin's hands that it becomes this incredible movie. So the Legion book is supposed to be a really, really good book too, and then in other people's hands. And I think Blatty had a lot to do actually with the making of that film as well. It falls short. I've never seen them. I've never seen a sequel to this movie. I just was kind of like, what's the point after this? Like, there's no reason. I do want to know more. Obviously, you want to know more, and some of these characters continue on, and it's interesting to see more. But sometimes the mystery is better than what you actually end up getting.
We see Father Karras running track. There's a man sitting on the bleachers watching him. He kind of looks like Gene Hackman, but he's not Gene Hackman. The men talk. This is William F. Kinderman. He works in homicide. He keeps telling Karras he looks like a boxer, like John Garfield. Has anyone ever told you that, Father? Karras responds and asks him, has anyone ever told you look like Paul Newman? No, I think he looks like Gene Hackman. William says, always. He wants to know about Burke. He asks if Karras knew him. He says he's seen him. William asks if Karras knows how Burke died, only what he's read in the papers. Father, what do you know of the subject of witchcraft? Karras did a psychiatric paper on it once. William has read it. He also asks if the desecration in the church has anything to do with witchcraft. Karras says perhaps it could be a ritual. William tells Karras how Burke died. Burke was found at the bottom of the stairs with his head turned completely around, facing backwards. It's possible it happened in the fall, but also unlikely. Now they got a witchcraft murder and a desecration inside the church. William thinks it's someone crazy, spiteful towards the church. Karras asks if he means it's a sick priest. William asks Karras because he's the psychiatrist, he might know who's having problems, but Karras doesn't know anybody like that. William laughs and goes, doctor's ethics. If you knew, you probably wouldn't tell. Karras says he probably wouldn't. Will tells Karras a psychiatrist in Cali was put in jail for not telling the cops what he knew about a patient. Karras asks if that's a threat. Will says he mentions it only in passing. And then Karras says, I could always say to the judge that it happened in confession. So the men laugh. Karras runs off, but Will chases him back down. He asks him if he likes movies. Says he's got tickets to the best shows in town. His lady never goes. He hates to go alone. He loves to talk film, discuss, critique, much like us here on In Madness.
Yay, we're very Kinderman. I love Kinderman. I love this character.
Yeah.
He in the book, he's a little more like the Columbo character, where he's sort of bumbling around like, oh, I got one more question for you, and innocently asks a question, and then but that doesn't make sense because this happened. And we get more of Kinderman in the book, and him trying to figure this out. I love him. Their interaction together is great. He's a very kind of old school, old timey detective. It's pretty fantastic. Part
who
and
reminds me of
who's that?
Arbogast. You
Okay.
know Arbogast?
No.
From he's the detective from Psycho.
Oh, that's his name.
Yeah, Arbogast. Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I got to bone up on my Psycho because we might hit that
do
in
Psycho. I think we got to do Psycho in 2024. One of my favorites ever. But yeah, he's just another detective in the movie. They're similar dudes, I think.
Yeah, I love this character, this Kinderman character, and it brings, when we're world building, it just brings something else to this film. This is where, when people emulate a film like this, they would skip these little parts here. You know, we world build really quick. He gets passes to movies. His wife doesn't always want to go. In the book, he actually talks about, it's really funny. He mentions the soundtrack of a film that he didn't like, and he thought that it was overpowering and they didn't even need it. And it's just funny because this film has very little. The Exorcist has very little soundtrack at all, and it's shot very much like a documentary in a lot of ways. Without that, it's got a lot of sound effects, but not a lot of actual score to it. But yeah, let's go Kinderman.
He asks Karras to go to the movie with him. Karras says, who's in it? Will tells him who's in it. Karras declines. I've already seen it. Will asks one more time, any troubled priests around here? Karras says, go pick on the Dominicans. Will says he could have Karras deported. Karras laughs and walks off. We're in the testing facility. They're watching Reagan flipping out on a monitor, telling her mom it's unlike anything they've ever seen before. We see Reagan with scratches and cuts all over her face and her lips. The docs say they've only seen this in primitive cultures, a somnambular form possession. It starts with conflict or guilt. It leads to the patient's delusions that the body has been invaded by some alien intelligence, a spirit. Mother refuses to lock up Reagan in an asylum, and she's surrounded by this large team of doctors, all in white coats, all trying to figure out what the hell is wrong with Reagan, but they're getting no answers, and Mother is clearly upset. The doctor says there's one outside chance for a cure. They ask if she's religious. She says no. What about Reagan? No. Why? And the doctor comes right out with it. Have you ever heard of an exorcism? Mother looks shocked. They explain it's a ritual where a rabbi or priest try to drive out the so-called invading spirit. It's pretty much been disregarded by everyone except Catholics, who keep it in the closet as sort of an embarrassment, but it has worked. But it's purely a force of suggestion. The victim's belief of the possession is what helped cause it. So in the same way, belief in the power of exorcism can make it disappear. And Mother's like, you're saying I should take my kid to a witch doctor. So is this all in Reagan's head?
Right. And we haven't gotten to, hey, this is demonic possession and you need to have an exorcism to get this demon out. It's just, hey, do this exorcism and you're going to trick the sort of split personality into thinking it's a demon, and it'll play along with that system that's in place, and it'll leave on its own. It's just interesting. We're still hitting the medical piece and the sort of mental stability piece hard in this, before, even though we've already seen some wild things, and we're about to see a few more wild things.
They take Reagan back home. William, the homicide investigator, is taking a look at the now legendary long stairway that Burke fell down and died. Mother's tucking Reagan in, reaches under her pillow and finds a crucifix. Will then finds at the bottom of the steps another little statue figure, an idol. It sort of looks like what is it? Yeah, it's like a little clay thing that I guess Reagan made.
Yeah, so it's one of her little like clay animals that would have probably fallen out of her window.
Mother comes out and asks one of the house helpers if they put the crucifix under Reagan's pillow, and they say no. We see William walking up the steps, and it's a lot of steps. He's out of breath when he approaches the top. He sees the window. It's the window of Reagan's room. Mother is freaking out, asking all the helpers who put the crucifix under Reagan's pillow. Nobody knows. There's a knock at the door, and it's William from homicide. He wants to ask Reagan if Burke was in her room that night. Mother says she was heavily sedated. She's asking why all the questions. He says it's strange. Burke came to visit, stays 20 minutes, and leaves a sick girl alone. Isn't it likely he'd fall? It isn't likely he'd fall from a window. A fall wouldn't do that to his neck. Maybe 1 in 1,000. My hunch is that he was killed by a very powerful man. It makes it very probable that Burke was killed and then pushed from Reagan's window. But no one was in the room except Reagan. So how can this be? He asked Mother if the housekeepers had any visitors or packages dropped off. She says she can ask him. He says, never mind. She offers him another cup of coffee, expecting him to say no and get the hell out of there. And he goes, yes, please.
No, Kinderman, he's already let everyone know he loves films too, right? So he's smitten even with just the idea of being around Chris.
Annoyed, she gets up, makes some more coffee. Will's snooping around the house, and he finds Reagan's arts and craft laying around. He picks up a little figure that sort of resembles the one he just found outside. He asks Mother if she remembers Burke being in her room that night. She says she'd have no reason to. He says he must explore every possible outcome. Mother says when Reagan is better, she'll ask her. Then awkwardly, he asks her for an autograph. He says it's for his daughter. She asks his daughter's name, and then he laughs, says he lied, and it's for him. He saw one of her movies, Angel, which I thought was very ironic.
Yeah.
At least 6 times. He leaves. Mother puts the chain lock on the door behind him, and she is stressing the hell out. Not 1 second later, a rumbling upstairs. Reagan screaming. Another demonic voice screaming, you bitch. Mother runs upstairs to find objects flying all over the room. Total madness. And then, in one of the most insane scenes in movie history, there's Reagan with the crucifix, stabbing it into her crotch, screaming at the same time in a demonic voice, let Jesus fuck you. She's covered in blood. Mother jumps on Reagan to grab the crucifix out of her hand, and if that's not bad enough, Reagan grabs Mother's face, forces it into her bloody crotch, and in the demon voice is yelling, lick me. slaps mother to the floor. The helpers from the house try to run into the room to help. The door closes on its own. Mother crawls to the door, and again, another iconic shot. Reagan's head spins 180 degrees around, and in Burke's voice says, "Do you know what she did? Your cunty daughter." Mother screams in agony.
And everyone else does.
Oh.
Everyone else does. You know, in a story in New York at the American Museum of Moving Image, or maybe it's just the Museum of Moving Image, I'm not sure. They have the animatronic, the giant life-size Linda Blair that they built, that the head turns around, and it's like in the showcase and everything, and you can see it. The head's not turning around, but you see like where it does, and you can go see it in person. And it's like sitting up in a case, so it's pretty, like in this glass case, pretty disturbing to just kind of walk in and be looking at different movie artifacts, and that's sitting there, and you can see it life size. So you should check that out if you haven't ever seen it. It's really cool.
We should do a little In Madness field trip there.
Oh, it'd be amazing. I once went there and got to go behind the scenes into like their storage room area, and like just open a box and be like, "Oh, here's Freddy Krueger's claws, and here's like something from The Godfather," and like, yeah, it was like a behind the scenes museum tour. It was really cool. But
Whoa.
yeah, we should go there. There's a movie theater not far from there too, so maybe you could actually drag me out in public to a movie.
Sandwiches, a museum, and a movie? What kind of date is this? This sounds like one of the best
Whoa, that's
nights
a
ever.
lot. That's a lot for one day.
That's too much for one day. I'll just split it up over 3 years, I guess.
What if it's The Exorcist playing? I don't know if I'd want to see it on, even though
No,
I've
I
seen it a
can't.
lot.
No, I wanna see something with a little bit of humor in it.
Yeah.
We cut to mother outside wearing sunglasses. She got a headscarf on. She's approached by Father Karras. She's been waiting there for him. They share a smoke. She asks how a shrink ends up becoming a priest. He says it's the other way around. The society sent them through medical school. They met each other through a mutual priest friend. She asks what happens if a person comes to him like a murderer. They want some help. Do you have to turn them in? He says if they came to him for spiritual advice, he would say no. He would try to convince them to turn themselves in. She goes casually, how do you go about getting an exorcism? He stops and asks, I beg your pardon. If a person is possessed by a demon, how do they get an exorcism? Well, I'd have to get them into a time machine and get them back to the 16th century because it doesn't happen anymore. She goes, since when? Since they learned about mental illness, paranoia, schizophrenia, everything I learned about in medical school. He says, since the day he became a priest, I have never met one who has ever performed an exorcism. She says, someone very close to me is probably possessed and needs an exorcist. Father Karras, it's my little girl. She starts
Except, I was going to say, they have started Vatican to do in recent years ongoing trainings on exorcism, and the call for them has been ramped up recently. And I don't know if some of it they think is just attributed to pop culture influences and the call for it, but other things, just listen, a lot of that back in the day was just people with mental illness that needed other kinds of help that they couldn't get, and they couldn't explain why. So they just, did those types of things for them and hoped it worked out. But I find it interesting, if you look it up, that in recent years, it's kind of ramped up a little bit again. So I don't know. They might have to get like an AI to do the exorcism.
Oh, man. AI exorcism.
Oh,
that
wow.
Sounds like a horror movie that's coming out in like a year or two.
That's a film. I forgot. You just reminded me of it. We're gonna jump all the way to the beginning because I wanted to say this, but in the novel, when he's digging around in Iraq, there's a line in there, and I thought of you right when I read it or listened to it, because I was like, this would be a perfect metal band name. It says that let me see if I'm gonna get it wrong, but I think it was the brittle remains of cosmic torture.
Oh, Cosmic Torch is a fucking really good one.
So I was like, oh wow, okay. But anyway, I threw you off.
No, that's all. Mother starts sobbing. Karis grabs her and walks with her, telling her that's all the more reason to forget about an exorcism. He says it could make things worse. He says the church, before it approves an exorcism, conducts an investigation, and that takes time. She asks if he can do it. He says he needs a church approval, and that's rarely given. She wants him to see her. He says it's a psychiatrist. She gets furious. She needs a priest. She's seen every psychiatrist, and they sent her to him, and now he's going to send her to them. She bursts into tears, frustrated that absolutely no one can help her daughter. Karis arrives at the house. You can hear Reagan growling from downstairs. They head up to the room. Karis walks in, and there's Reagan, cut all up around the face with this tube jammed up her nose. There's vomit on her chest, strapped to the bed. She's got this demonic look in her eyes, staring at Karis. He says,
and
hello.
that's the tube is a feeding tube.
Okay.
Right. So she's not eating. And in the book, they mentioned that she's got like a diaper that they have to change. So she's not eating, and they have to be able to like feed her somehow. So that goes like all the way down to like her stomach.
Gross.
Which makes it even crazier when they rip it out, when she rips it out. But yeah, absolutely.
Ugh. He says hello. He wants to help. She says, loosen the straps. He says, you'll hurt yourself, Reagan. She says, I'm not Reagan. He says, well, I'm Damien Karis. Reagan says, and I'm the devil. Now kindly undo these straps. Karis says, if you're the devil, make the straps disappear. And she says, that's much too vulgar display of power, Karis. And yes, that is where Pantera got the title for their album, Vulgar Display of Power. So in honor of the In Madness playlist, I feel like it's probably only right to add one of the more demonic songs from that album, By Demons Be Driven, to the In Madness playlist.
Oh, what a perfect choice.
Exorcist. Yeah, even though it's not part of the movie, I feel like it's linked. That's the link right there. So I will be adding that. Make sure you check out the In Madness playlist. Now the only place you're going to hear Whitney Houston into Beethoven into Pantera. So shout out to the In Madness playlist. Karis asks, where's Reagan? She says she's in here with us. He asks to show him Reagan, and he'll loosen the straps. And in the homeless man's voice from the beginning of the movie, Reagan says, help an old altar boy, father. Karis looks back puzzled. Reagan says, your mother's in here with us, Karis. Would you like to leave a message? I'll see that she gets it. And then he says, if that's true, what's my mother's maiden name? Reagan gets frustrated and projectile vomits green pea soup right into Karis's fucking face.
Yeah, and that so everyone talks about a pea soup. Friedkin said in an interview in 2003 that a lot of it was just porridge covered with pea soup coloring, but there was pea soup used as well. But I guess like the thicker bits that they have to kind of mix it up a little bit. And it's crazy. That's also super iconic. People have sort of emulated that from this point forward too. I think it's a great choice that it's that green. It's like if her stomach's empty, it's kind of like bile that she's like just vomiting up on everybody.
I just figured it was like demonic goo.
Right, and demonic goo.
That's also a good band name.
Demonic Goo. That's our comedic metal band. When Cosmic Terror breaks up, we form Demonic Goo instead. The voices for Reagan in this, it was done primarily a bunch of different voices, but Mercedes McCambridge provided a lot of this unique sounds. And she went to like some crazy place to get these sounds. So she was chain smoking, swallowing raw eggs. She drank heavily. She was a former heavy drinker, so she kind of like fell off the wagon just for this. And then she requested that a priest be with her on set to counsel her as she did all of these insane voices. In the book, a lot of animal sounds are mixed in too, which really would have been interesting. But there's a horse and a pig, and she does say sow earlier on too, so they left kind of some of those lines in, but we do hear these animal sounds. And then the last thing I'll say about this is the altar boy, it was an altar boy father thing. And then we saw the guy earlier and his eyes were a little bit off. There's a lot of people who believe that this demon is sort of ramping it up and stalking him. So he's possessed that person, the altar boy, or he's taking him over momentarily just to kind of harass the priest leading into this situation. It's kind of interesting and kind of, he sought out the two weakest foes that he can find. He's the priest who's lost his faith and this little girl who's going through emotional pain with the divorce of her parents and her mom probably working all the time and not seeing her as much. So it's interesting. And so because the demon feels like he likes to jar with them a little bit. He likes to go at it with them. And in the book, it's even more. There's long scenes of them talking and he's giving them a hard time and being funny and stuff like that. But it seems like he's up for a good fight and sort of disappointed when it's not, when, people aren't fighting back.
Yeah. We get the sick shot of Reagan. She's laying there covered in vomit with this demonic look in her eyes, breathing heavily, staring at Karis. We cut to Karis looking at Reagan's arts and crafts on the wall, and I see what I believe is the big bad wolf and Little Red Riding Hood, which is perhaps a metaphor for this demon that has taken over Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
Mother's cleaning and ironing his puke shirt. He says, only against the possibility of doing Reagan more harm than good. Mother says, nothing you could do. He's only against the possibility of doing Reagan more harm than good. She says, nothing you could do can make it any worse. He says he can. He needs evidence the church would accept as signs of possession, like her speaking a language she's never known or studied. Mother asks what else. He doesn't know. He has to study. She thought he was an expert. He says, there are no experts. You probably know as much about possession as any priest. Your daughter doesn't say she's a demon. She says she's the devil himself. If you've seen as many psychotics as I have, you'd realize that's the same thing as saying you're Napoleon. He tells Mother the best thing for Reagan will be 6 months under observation, the best hospital she can find. She says, you could show me Reagan's double, same face, same voice, and I'd know it wasn't her. I'd know in my gut that thing upstairs isn't my daughter. Mm-hmm. She screams, tell me for a fact there's nothing wrong with my daughter except her mind. Tell me you know an exorcism wouldn't do any good.
Yeah, there's no way her bed is doing all this other things and all this stuff is happening if you're just like, you can't control objects with your mind. I've tried. You tried, believe me. I'm trying it all the time. I try to
Jedi. I know you're Jedi.
I try to use the Force like, once a month, Shawn, and it
get
just
the remote control.
Yeah, it never even like. It never even quivers. It never even moves at all. I'm trying really hard.
Just the Blu-ray, just the Exorcist Blu-ray.
Yeah, just that.
That fell off the desk.
Oh my God, that's something else. Tune into part 1, and we can explain how we led into this film with each other. I've been listening to the trying to get the novel done, and kind of listening to it at all hours. So I'll just be like, in my kitchen, like emptying the dishwasher with headphones on, listening to the novelization. And it's read, the 40th anniversary is read by Blatty, the writer. And he's kind of doing all the voices too. So I'm getting, when it's this long demonic speech, he's like yelling into the thing. So I'm just in my kitchen, like emptying the dishwasher, and this guy's yelling at this horrific things at me.
Fuck me.
Yeah. But I'll be happy to visit, the Grinch after this, maybe.
Yeah, that'll be our first movie of next year. No, definitely not, but maybe something close to that. Outside, Karis asked Mother if Reagan knew a priest was coming over. No. Or if she knew his mother died recently. She says that she did, and she's very sorry. He says, no. Did Reagan know? Mother says, not at all. Why? Karis says, it's not important, and leaves. Karis walks off. We see William from Homicide watching him. He looks at Karis and then looks over at Reagan's window. We cut to Karis listening to a recording of Reagan making a message for her dad. She sounds happy, full of life, like a kid. We cut to Karis in church, cracking the little church wafer in half, saying he broke the bread, gave it to his disciples, and said, take this, all of you, and eat it, for this is my body. When supper ended, he took this cup and gave it to his disciples and said, all of you drink from it. This is a cup of my blood.
Yeah, so he's giving himself communion to try to...
Oh, so he's doing it to himself.
Yeah, I think so. Right?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
didn't
see
know that.
anyone else in that scene.
Yeah, I
He's
didn't
just
know.
by himself. So I think he's just doing communion for himself, what explains it, because he's seen something crazy and he's a guy who's kind of lost his faith and his way a little bit and super distraught about the loss of his mom. So I think he's just trying to figure out a way to kind of reaffirm his own personal faith there.
We cut to Reagan in bed speaking to Karis in a demonic voice. She says, "What an excellent day for an exorcism." I like Pazuzu has like a little bit of like a sense of humor. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Karis sort of smiles and goes, "You'd like that?" Intensely, she says, "But wouldn't that drive you out of Reagan? It would bring us together. You and Reagan, you and us."
Mm-hmm.
Karis sits down and by itself a drawer opens. Karis asks, "Did you do that?" She says, "Yes." He closes it, tells her, "Do it again." She refuses. In time.
And that's the sparring. So I think that's the part where it's like an excellent day for an exorcism. Open the drawer, don't do it again. You and us. It's definitely, hey, you lost your faith, and I know I can take you. We can be evenly matched. So, and I'm gonna have fun with you before I continue on. I don't know what the end game is for this demon. And even the end of this movie confuses me a little bit, but here we go.
She says in Latin, "Mi rabi dictu, don't you agree?" Karis says, "You speak Latin?" Hits record on a reel-to-reel he's got hooked up in the room. They both speak Latin. Reagan responds in French and laughs. Karis asks how long the devil is planning to stay in Reagan. She replies, "Until she rots and lies stinking in the earth." He takes a small vial out of his pocket. Her eyes go wide. She says, "Keep it away." He starts spreading the water all over her in a crucifix. She screams in pain. It burns and is writhing in pain. She's speaking backwards. We hear many voices coming out of her mouth. Cut to
Mhm.
Karis walking downstairs in the mother's study. She's on the phone. She tells someone she's going through a lot, hangs up, and she's talking to Karis, offers him a drink. He asks, "Where's Reagan's father?" "In Europe." "You should tell him what's happening." Karis says, "I told Reagan that was holy water. I sprinkled it on her and she reacted violently, but it's tap water. Holy water is blessed and that doesn't support a case for possession." Mother says she killed Burke. Karis is like, "What?" "She killed Burke. She pushed him out the window."
Mm.
Cut to Karis and his buddy listening back to the audio of him asking the demon inside Reagan who they are. And you hear many voices at once coming out of her. The man says it's a language, but it's English. Karis doesn't understand, so his buddy plays the tape in reverse, and you hear Reagan saying, "Give us time, let her die."
Mm-hmm.
Cut to Karis listening again in his apartment. Reagan screaming, "I am no one, fear the priest." And then over and over again, she's screaming, "Marin." Karis gets a phone call, scares the crap out of him, and says he's on his way. He's running back to Reagan's house. He's met by Reagan's babysitter, says she didn't want Reagan's mom to see. She opens the door to Reagan's room and it's freezing. You see all of the cold air coming out of everyone's mouth.
Right, and so, they had to do that because this is
Refrigerate the room, I
72.
guess.
So
Yeah.
they did refrigerate it, so it was insanely cold, and they could only film for certain periods of time because then it warms up when you have the lights on and all the actors are in there. But Linda Blair always mentions that everyone on set's wearing parkas and gloves and hats, and she's just in a nightgown.
Terrible.
This 12-year-old girl, I guess she was 12. She's 12 in the movie. I don't know what she is in real life when she films it, but around that same age. And I just can't help but think there's no way they could film this movie in that way. Now, first of all, they would digitally add the breath, so you don't have to worry about that part. But the rules for actors and for kid actors now would be like they can only film for a certain amount of hours a day, let alone just being in a nightgown in the freezing cold. Um, on top of the scenes before that she had to do with the crucifix and sort of getting through that scene. There's a behind the scenes documentary and they sort of show a little bit of that on set, and it's even uncomfortable with them trying to talk to her about like what she needs to do. Yeah.
Horrible. Horrible. This movie is deeply disturbing. I'm glad we're getting it over with now. Let's never speak of it again. The babysitter goes up to Reagan, opens up her PJs, and written on Reagan's stomach, inside popping out, says, "Help me."
Mm-hmm.
We cut to him meeting a higher priest in the church. He's being questioned if the possession is genuine. Karis doesn't know. He made a judgment that it meets the conditions set down in ritual. Man asks Karras, would he be doing the exorcism? He says yes. Man says, might be best to have someone with experience, someone who spent time in foreign missions. Cut to this higher priest talking to an even higher priest. They're discussing having Karras assist in the exorcism. It's best to have a psychiatrist present anyway. He asks who's going to do the exorcism, and the man says, Lancaster Merrin. Isn't he in Iraq? No, he's been back for months. He's working on another book. One of the priests thinks Merrin is too old. How's his health? He's still running around digging up tombs, plus he's got experience. 10 to 12 years ago in Africa, the exorcism lasted months, damn near killed them.
Mm-hmm. So is this... So he's digging around, and he finds that stuff in the beginning, and then he says he has somewhere to go. Do we assume he went to do that exorcism in Africa, and that's where he had to go? Can we assume timeline-wise that's where he meant?
Yeah, perhaps. I also thought he meant he had to go to that statue when he went in the beginning. I didn't know.
Okay.
I also don't know what he went to that statue for or what the purpose of that was.
Right, like he kind of just stood there, and it's just
Yeah.
a cool movie scene.
Yeah.
But you definitely get a sense that they're kind of a little bit of facing off. Like he's brought in for a reason, and this is going to be the demon's true sparring partner, and he can take down the weak man who lost his faith, at the same time as taking down the aging guy who defeated him previously.
We cut to Father Merrin. He's taking a peaceful walk. He's approached by another man of the church, giving a message that he's being summoned for another exorcism.
Mm-hmm.
Reagan's face appears on the screen, and her demonic eyes are wide open. Cab pulls up. Foggy night. Reagan's house. Merrin gets out. Cab drives away. Takes a few steps forward. And there's the iconic shot. Him staring at this house, shrouded in darkness, the light coming out of the window, shining onto him.
Yeah, one of the most iconic still shots of any movie at all, not even just horror movie. I would venture to say that most people knowing that image would know it's The Exorcist. If they've never seen the movie or still afraid to see it, everybody knows that's that. Do you own any Exorcist merch, Shawn?
No, man. I was strolling around Walmart on Halloween, because Walmart usually has great horror shirts, and they had an Exorcist shirt, and it was the cover, and it was like a slime green, which I love. I love slime green, and it's like, and they didn't have my size. I was so mad. I was also going to say that iconic cover is certainly not the cover of my shitty DVD. That if you can't see us on YouTube right now, make sure you watch. Make sure you follow us on the socials at In Madness Pod, and I'll post the actual cover and my horrible cover. We'll do.
I don't. Listen, I don't want to get hate mail from the art director on that project. Probably someone else above him picked that final image, but yeah, certainly not my first choice for an image. And again, I have to see that in person because it feels like it doesn't even really look like her. It's very interesting.
We see Reagan's face again. Her eyes are wide. He knocks on the door, and it's him. It's Merrin, the dude who was digging around in the very beginning of the movie. And then he meets Father Karras. We have our dynamic duo. Upstairs, Reagan lets out a horrible scream. Everyone hears it. Merrin asks Karras to pick a bunch of items from the church so they could perform the exorcism. He wants to start immediately. Karras asks if he wants any background on the case, and Father Merrin says, why?
Yeah, he's just cutting to the chase. He's the white wolf in this. They just called him. He's just going to come in and take care of business, and it doesn't matter. You get a sense that he doesn't want to connect in any way because, well, he'll tell you, don't listen to anything the demon is saying, and he doesn't want to have any sort of emotional connection to anything to do with the case.
He tells Karras to avoid conversation with the demon, ask only what is relevant, but anything beyond that is dangerous. The demon's a liar. He will lie to confuse us. He'll also mix lies with truth to attack us. The attack is psychological and powerful. Don't listen. Remember, do not listen. Karras tells Merrin he wants to tell him the different personalities Reagan has manifested. There are 3. Merrin cuts him off and says, there is only one. The men gear up and head upstairs. Reagan is screaming. Merrin asks another, were you going to say something? Or
No. No.
Okay. Reagan is screaming. Marin asks Mother what Reagan's middle name is, Teresa. They head inside. Marin starts making the sign of the cross, and the demon says, "Stick your cock up her ass, you fucking worthless cocksucker."
Oh.
He says, "Be silent," and throws holy water as she writhes in pain. The men begin to pray. Reagan hocks a goddamn pea goop loogie right into Marin's eye. Karras goes to help him, but he just keeps on praying as if nothing happened. It's ice cold in the room. You could see every breath, every word cold coming out of their mouths. The men are praying. Reagan sits up and says, "Your mother sucks cocks in hell, Karras, you faithless slime." The men continue praying. Reagan is screaming. The bed is shaking. Marin splashes her with more holy water. The bed rises off the floor. Marin's calling to Karras to finish the prayer, but he's too shocked by what's happening in front of him, and he is silent for a moment as Marin keeps calling to him. Karras finally finishes the prayer, and Reagan is writhing in pain. Her face is in and out of shadows, and for a brief moment again, we see the demon face of Pazuzu. Marin puts his hand on Reagan's forehead, and this non-stop flow of green, oozy slime is just constantly coming out of her mouth. The men continue praying. Reagan begins laughing. Marin screams, "I cast you out, unclean spirit." Reagan sits up and viciously replies, "Shove it up your ass." Marin screams, "In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ," and the ceiling begins to crack. The door slams. Things in the room begin to break. The men are screaming their prayers, and fucking Reagan sits up, and again, in one of the most iconic shots in movie history, her head spins a full 360 degrees.
And you know, it's funny on the making of, they talk about when they're filming that scene, and they realize they kind of do a test run on it, and they realize they're not seeing her breath. So then they had to wire it up with a tube and have some air come through the tube so you can see cold breath coming out of this, you know, giant prototype of Linda Blair that they built.
Brilliant.
But if you look at it closely now, you can you can tell when you look closely that it's like coming out of another area, you know, like off the side of her face or whatever. But it's pretty crazy. And again, to get your breath to be seen that well on camera, and they're lighting it well and everything, like they just had to make that so incredibly cold in there. So it's already, everybody is uncomfortable while they're making this movie. We're uncomfortable with the subject matter. We're uncomfortable with putting a young girl in this predicament as we film it. And now we're just in this freezing cold box, you know, trying to kind of figure this out. It's crazy.
We see her face blended for a moment with the demon face. The entire house begins to shake. Reagan screams to Karras, "You killed your mother. You left her alone to die. She'll never forgive you." Karras is screaming at her to shut up. The blanket tears off of Reagan. The straps on her arms begin to tear. Her eyes roll over white. And in the Jesus Christ pose, this bitch floats off the bed. And then again, one of the most iconic chants in horror history, repeated over and over again. Come on, Vertebrae, give it to me.
Well, you got it. Come on, Shawn. This is all you.
We both got to do it, like Karras and Marin.
I'm with you.
The power of Christ compels you. The power of Christ compels you.
I love
over and over again until Reagan finally descends slowly back into the bed. Karras runs over to her and ties her hands together. He goes for her legs, and Reagan rises up and gives him the old double axe handle across the back, and he falls to the floor. Marin continues splashing Reagan with holy water. The entire house shakes like an earthquake hit it, but both the men get thrown on the floor. Marin looks up, and we get this dope shot. It's all lit up behind Reagan. All we see is her silhouette. She's moving, contorting, almost ritualistic kind of movement. And behind her, another light shines, and Marin can see the evil demonic statue he saw in the beginning in Iraq with the wings and the huge dick thing. Marin continues praying. Reagan becomes still. Karras grabs the blanket to cover her. Marin says, "Let's rest before we start again," and leaves the room as Karras sits there stunned. The men are sitting outside the room on the steps. Karras asks, "Why this girl? It doesn't make sense." Marin says, "I think the point is to make us despair, to see ourselves as animal and ugly, to reject the possibility that God loves us." Marin excuses himself to his bathroom to take pills. Damien heads into Reagan's room alone.
And I think he has like a heart condition. And
Oh,
that's
I thought the demon turned him into like a pillhead.
No, I think he has a heart condition in the book they go into. I think they said it was like nitroglycerin. I think he would take that for some sort of like carotid artery type thing. It's probably not something you would take now. I think that's what they said. I could be totally wrong, but he has kind of like a previous sort of heart issue. So the demon knows that he's weak. He's just gonna have fun with this weak priest that probably beat him before, and now this other guy who's pretty much lost his faith, and he's just gonna torture them. I don't know what the end game is, though. I'm not sure.
I mean, I thought it was just to kill. Yeah, I mean to kill Reagan.
But why?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's the point of demons possessing people in the first place.
Right? Yeah, I don't know.
What's any of their end game? Why do demons possess people? If you're a demon and you're listening to Id Madness Pod, you sure you let us know why do you possess people? What's the end game? What's supposed to happen? Like possess other people?
Because where do you go when you're not possessing somebody? Another plane of existence? Or you just like popping back and forth from like you're playing cards with a bunch of other demons, and then you're like,
Well, I
hey,
mean,
I'm going to take off and go possess a human for a little bit and then come back and hang out with you guys.
it did say like it'll stop when she's dead and rotting in the ground. I mean, maybe the point is to kill them and then like bring them to hell. Maybe they need like they're short on help in hell, and they're like the recruiter. The demon's like, yeah, this little girl, yeah. Maybe that's the point.
It's not the devil. She's not possessed by the devil. It's a demon, and they make that clear that it's a demon and not.
Yeah, that was the demon being like, I'm the manager here, but they're not the manager.
Right. The demon's the middle manager, probably.
Yeah. He's like, is the devil around? No, I'm the devil. Karras is staring at Reagan, but sees his mother instead. Reagan begins growling at him, and then Reagan starts talking like Karras' mother, asking, why'd you do this to me, Demi?
Demi.
Please, I'm afraid, Demi.
Demi.
Karras says, you're not my mother. Karras checks her vitals. Marin walks in and says, what's wrong? Karras says, it's her heart. Marin asks if there's anything they could give her. Karras says she'll go into a coma. Reagan again begins talking using the voice of Karras' mother, asking him why. He screams, you're not my mother. Marin tells him not to listen and tells Karras to leave. Marin kneels next to Reagan and begins to pray again.
Mm-hmm.
Downstairs, mother approaches Karras and asks if it's over. He says no. She asks if Reagan's going to die. He looks at her long and hard and says no.
Mm-hmm.
Looks upstairs intently and begins making his way back up to the room. The doorbell rings, and there's your man, Will from Homicide, looking William Kinderman from Homicide, looking none too pleased. The fart look that he has on his face when she opens that door is priceless.
Yeah.
Karras heads inside the room, and Marin is dead. Dead as a doornail, laying on the bed, his holy water on the floor. Reagan is just chilling in the corner of the bed, looking more demon than human, just watching along, observing. Karras slams on Marin's chest to revive him, but he's gone. Reagan's watching along, laughing. Mm-hmm. So Karras attacks her and starts beating Reagan up, screaming, take me, damn you, take me.
Yeah, and he's made a decision. I think he's kind of made that decision a little bit when he responds to Chris about, will she die? And then he heads back up the steps. Like
I think that's the moment he makes up his mind. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's formulating a plan and hoping that that'll work. But I think he wasn't 100% sure if he could even do it.
Well, he does. Because the fucking demon takes over Karras, transfers out of Reagan into him. He looks out the open window, and for a moment, demonic looking, we see him trying to finish the job. He still looks like he's going to towards Reagan.
Right.
but he's almost forcing himself to stop, and he quickly changes back to Karis and screams, "No!" And facing the same fate as Burke, Karis makes the leap of faith out the window, possessed, and takes a nasty looking tumble down the steps as we hear pretty much every bone breaking in his body like Mr. Glass.
Mm-hmm.
Mother and Will from Homicide enter the room to find Reagan crying in the corner, destruction all around the window area. Will looks out the window, and at the bottom of the steps is Karis with a large mess of blood around his head. People start surrounding him. Police sirens on their way. Will stands in the middle of the room, horrified at what he's looking at. Out the window, Karis is dying. Next to him, Marin is dead. Mother and Reagan are holding each other, screaming and crying. What a hellhole this place is.
Mm-hmm.
Karis
And
yep.
Karis, when he falls down the steps in that scene, there's words graffitied on the wall that say "Fight Pigs" on the left-hand side, and a lot of people think it's a reference to a Bible story, where it's in the Gospel of Matthew, in which Jesus exorcises demons into a herd of pigs. So just like Karis has kind of exorcised that demon into himself. The pigs then run down a hill to their death the same way Karis does down the steps.
Damn. Sounds pretty accurate to me.
Yeah.
Karis' priest buddy, who tucked him in bed in the beginning of the movie, pushes through the crowd of onlookers. He approaches Karis' lifeless body and grabs his hand and says, "If you'd like to make a confession." And this is so depressing. It's so horrible. Karis can't do anything. He just squeezes the guy's hand. Crying, the man asks Karis if he's sorry for having offended God and for all the sins of your past life. And Karis squeezes his hand again. His buddy says a prayer, and that's it. Karis is dead. Poor guy.
Right, and that's like his absolution there, because he committed suicide, right? So if you commit suicide, the right to believe that you can't get into heaven if you committed suicide, I think, right? Is that the belief? So
something like that, yeah. But what if you do it to defeat a demon?
Right, and then I'll ask you too, Shawn. Okay, got this plan, gonna jump out the window, defeat the demon. Why doesn't the demon just go in? There's a whole group of people hanging out.
Or the guy holding his hand.
Go into another body.
Yeah, yeah.
I think they make this movie now, and Dyer's holding his hand there, and then he turns to the camera, and there's like a glint in his eye.
Like Michael Jackson in Thriller.
Yeah, it's not over yet, ladies and gentlemen.
When he walks away with the dude to go to the movie, he turns around. Yeah. We cut to maybe a few days or weeks later. The stairway is cleaned up. The house is being packed up. The family seems to be moving out. Mother tells the babysitter she's going to miss her. She asks if she'll change her mind. But this babysitter has spent this whole time looking into the eyes of hell. She has had it with this family. The babysitter gives Mother a pendant. She says she found it in Reagan's room, and it seems to be, again, that same pendant that I thought it was.
Yeah, St. Joseph pendant. Yep.
That he was holding in the beginning of the movie. The women hug. Mother calls for Reagan. Outside the house is Karis' priest buddy, who read him his last rites. He approaches Mother. She says Reagan doesn't remember any of it. He says that's good. Mother introduces him to Reagan. Reagan sees he's a priest and grabs him and pulls him close, hugs him, and gives him a kiss on the cheek. I feel like she remembers something.
I'm wondering, and it's crazy. Good job. It's been a while's past, but she comes out. She looks older than she did in the beginning of the movie, and she's still healing. It's just, boy, they've really gone through something in this. But I don't know how long the movie took to film, but she looks, and I don't know how they filmed it and in what order, but in that scene, she looks a lot older than she does earlier in the movie. It's crazy.
About what the demon will do that to you, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
Reagan runs off to the car. The family drives off. They stop the car. Mother calls the priest over and says, "I thought you'd like to keep this," and gives him the pendant that Marin had. He squeezes it, puts it back in her hand, and says, "Why don't you keep it?" Car drives off. Reagan waves. The priest walks past the window Karis leapt out of, which is now boarded up. Got a final shot at the iconic staircase once again. The priest seems very sad to have lost his friend. Walks back to the front of the house, and we see Will from Homicide, Kinderman. He tells him he just missed the family. He asks about Reagan. The priest says she's fine. Will says that's important. The men shake hands and walk off. Will stops him and asks if he'd like to go see a film with him. The priest asks who's in it. Will tells him, and just like Karras, the priest says, "I've seen it," and smiles. Will rolls his eyes and says, "Another one." He asks the man if he's had any lunch. The priest says no, and the men walk off together. And in our film, the priest looks back like Michael Jackson in Thriller with the morphed eyes. However, that's not what happens in this movie. The men walk off, and then we get hit with, again, one of the most iconic themes in horror history, the Exorcist theme, the end. Merry fucking Christmas, you filthy animals.
Holy moly.
We did it. Episode 22. Happy anniversary. Merry Christmas. Happy Exorcist anniversary. Man, we did it. We did it. We did. I'm proud of us. I'm proud of us.
Everybody that we would discuss the curse on this movie.
Yes, go ahead.
So there's a Cursed Films show on Shudder, a series, not a show, about different things that happen on different movies. If you haven't seen it, check it out. But I'm going to run through bullet points of what people say, in what way this film is cursed. So we get first, there's a major fire at the studio, causes delay to production. Most of the sets were destroyed, except for the one that they used for Reagan when she was possessed in the bedroom. Actor Max von Sydow's brother passed away on the first day of principal photography. They brought a Jesuit priest on board to bless the set. Burke and another actor dies while the film was in post-production. So the kicker is both these characters died on the film themselves.
Wow.
Ellen Bernstein was injured in that scene when she's thrown to the ground. And those injuries bother her to this day, messed up like her back or something like that. Linda Blair was injured, which we mentioned earlier on the set. The voice actor that we talked about before later suffered a horrific tragedy when her son killed his wife, kids, and then himself.
Jeez.
So we certainly get people passing out. We get this.
Wow.
There were lawsuits against Warner Brothers. There were other incidents. There were lots of issues with movie theaters because they let kids in that were way too young to see this.
Funny.
There was a major storm in Rome on the night of its Italian premiere.
Wow.
The real radiology team that was used for the scene, when she goes through that, the technician was later convicted of murder.
Oh my God.
And there's a few other like random little things, but listen, you might be able to go through any film. You have a certain amount of crew, and after that film comes out or it's finished, you start to add up things and be like, oh man, that's a lot of crazy things. But I certainly think they probably leaned into people knowing about this because it just helps the mystique of the movie. When I was a kid, everybody was completely terrified to see this movie. And one of the things was like everybody talked about like they saw it. Like, oh yeah, I saw The Exorcist.
Oh, with the head spins around because they know
they didn't see The Exorcist. They didn't see it. They just acted like they did, because when you talk to people who actually saw it and they remember when they actually saw it, I wish I had a memory of like the first time I saw it, full. I think I was older, but I had certainly seen scenes and kind of tried to watch it. Too, when you're younger, there's a lot of talking in between a lot of this other stuff, which we all love now as adults, and it's building all these characters. But the dinner party and all these types of things probably not as entertaining to a little kid. But yeah, this was like the Dare movie. Like, did you see The Exorcist? You didn't watch The Exorcist.
It's like the Myers house
thing. Yeah. I'm gonna say probably one of 3 or 4 most iconic horror films, and maybe if I was forced to make a list, one of the top 10 most influential films just in general of all time. Just so many things were emulated. Even we skimmed over it. But when there's like the help me thing, that's like on her skin, that's been used not on skin, but in other places throughout all kinds of movies and TV shows too. So it's definitely I'd love to hear other people's experiences with this. This was a lot to go through with such a fine-tooth comb. I know I missed a lot, and I purposely left a lot of these notes. Dig into this movie. You can find a website that'll tell you what was when they put it on broadcast television and what the reaction to that was and how they promoted it, and everything is very interesting too. There's a screenplay, like a cool screenplay version that was put out. Suntup Editions, which is a book publisher that I love, and one of the 0.5s will go into it, has a really incredible version of The Exorcist. The 50th anniversary 4K that I got, they put out an incredible version that's like in a Bible and stuff. I didn't get that one, but this elaborate set. The cover looks like it's a Bible, and it has like purple sides and everything. So, but yeah, this was wild. Are we
Perfect
okay?
time of year to do this happy 1-year anniversary. We want to hear your thoughts on this movie on the socials at Id Madness Pod. Make sure you follow us. Make sure you comment. Make sure you interact with us. Let's talk about these movies. We're talking about it, just me and Vertebrae, but we want to talk about it with you. Make sure you follow us on the YouTube channel. Subscribe, like, comment. Make sure you give 5 stars on everything. Hit us in the mail sack, idmadnesspod@gmail.com. For our next episode, most likely we will be doing a 0.5, and maybe we'll dip in the mail sack. I know that's what we did for the last 0.5. Maybe we'll do a little recap of Die Hard and The Exorcist, since we didn't really get a chance to do that, because just some more gnarly bits from Die Hard that I would like to get out there that knew that I didn't say in the thing that really bothered. It kept me up at night for the last couple of days.
No. And you know, I have one extra. You always ask me, did you get all your gnarly bits in?
Did you get all your gnarly bits in?
No, not this time, because it's The Exorcist. So I do have a bonus.
Wait, there's more.
We were talking about the TV release. So just really quickly, movies come out in the 70s. There's no VHS. People talk about what they think they saw on screen. Kids talk about it. And it didn't really happen, and the tall tale grows. So this comes out in 73. It's not on TV till 79. So there's 6 years of people building this up. I'm sure they did some re-releases in the theater, but maybe you only saw it once, and then 6 years later it goes on broadcast TV. They edit it out. It's on CBS. And the rating for this, you ready for this? 57 million viewers.
Whoa.
Think about that number when they tell you how many people watch the Super Bowl now, or how many people watch whatever show, or what's considered a really good rating. 57 million people were like, and it came out in April of 79, were like, I have to watch this. And you got to watch it when it's on, because if there were VCRs, not many people had them in 79.
They were very few legging the hell out of that.
Yeah, very few people would have had a VCR at that time, I think. It's those big top-loading VCRs. But 57 million people tuned in to see this. How many little kids were subjected to this even at home, because you got one TV and it's like, well, The Exorcist is on. This is what we're watching, kids.
Traumatize the world. That's what we're trying to do here on Id Madness Pod. We are worldwide now. Vertebrae recently let me know that our podcast has been listened to all throughout the globe, in places like Belgium and Singapore and Japan and France and Spain and Australia. Hello, world. Thank you for joining us for the 1-year anniversary of Id Madness Pod. You got all your gnarly bits in?
I did, and I never remember to do this, but I'm going to just say, follow me at Vertebrae33 on all the socials. I have my own line of Vertebrae 33 t-shirts that you can buy at Hot Topic, online, and in all Hot Topic stores. Any store you go into will have 1 or 2 of my shirts hanging up, so check them out there. Send me a picture if you buy it. Let me know if you're wearing it. We'll post it on the socials as well. And I appreciate everybody taking this ride for us. Thank you for listening to our first year. We did 1 year of this podcast, and we have plans to do more. And I promise we will get to some of the films in this year that we've sort of been putting off a little bit as we got better at this, and excited to take the year 2 journey with a lot of people.
Thank you. Happy anniversary to you, to this movie. Thank you for listening. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.